Systemic violence continues in Colombia. A new massacre was registered on Sunday in the department of Valle del Cauca. It is the 58th so far in 2022. Russia approves a new naval doctrine on the occasion of the National Day of the Russian Navy. The new guideline identifies the United States as the main threat. And in South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa closed the conference of the ruling African National Congress, which debated the fight against corruption and alternatives to face the global economic crisis. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. Violence doesn't stop in Colombia. On Sunday, the 58th massacre so far this year was registered. 4 indigenous people were killed in the department of Nariño. The Institute of Studies for Development and the Peace denounced that 4 people were murdered in the village of Altaguer, a rural area of the municipality of Barbacoas. Local and national media reported that 2 other people were wounded. In the past, stated that neither the name of the illegal armed group that perpetrated the massacre nor the identity of the victims is known. The Ombudsman's office had issued early warning in the municipalities of Barbacoas, Ricaurte, and San Andrés de Tumaco, saying that social leaders and the indigenous communities were at risk. The International Progressive Theater Festival continues in Venezuela with the participation of 15 countries and more than 47 shows. Is it a political, necessary, conscious, and critical theater to think and reflect on the realities of Latin America and the world? With a report, our correspondent, Yarleni Rosales.
Waiting for their turn to enter one of the oldest theaters in Caracas, that is, the Teatro Nacional. Founded more than a century ago, the place was ready for the curtain to open for the group El Patrón Vázquez, with a multi-award winning play Pundonor, declared one of the best one-man shows of the decade.
The play is called Pundonor, which is a rather strange word. It is a word that comes from chivalry novels. It comes from the Catalan word for point of honor. I play the pont the honor. She is a psychology professor who teaches and talks about the disciplinary society and returns to teach after a break from a leave of absence she had due to events of last year that she will explain throughout the play. And she gives an example of the theory. So the audience can take away an introductory class to the thought of Michael Fugo in a very easy way, because it's throughout emotion and experience of this professor that something happened to her in her academic environment.
The Caribbean was present. From Matanzas, in Cuba, it is a puppet play called Le Temps qui passe, kept to the stage. It is a title in Creole that means the time that passed. And these are memories, stories of stories, Haitian music, but it also includes the Caribbean, in particular the rhythm called song. It is a tribute to Virginia Lopez, a Cuban actress, for being a descendant of all those roots.
It is a recreation of the Haitian culture that we, the Guantanameros, enjoy, and it has to do with bringing back the memory of those migrants who brought their stories and legends to Cuba, and it is a way to bring them to the stage, make them compatible, since these stories have a vividness and presence in our daily life. It is good that they are recognized, and from this perspective of heritage to the cultural memory of a people.
The youngest members of the family also have a guaranteed place in the festival, among other plays, with the magic boxes of the Lambe Lambe Theater.
Our show is called Historias Mínimas, Minimum Stories. It's 5 historias mínimas. They are small stories that happen in each one of these boxes. Each story is different, and what you are going to see in each one is not repeated in the other one. A very nice work that reminds us of different types of movies and very nice memories.
The Progressive Theater Festival also includes a varied menu of conferences and seminars to discuss everything concerning today's playwriting.
Yarlenis Rosales y José Rondón, TeleSUR, Caracas, Venezuela.
Now we move on to other stories. Patricia Ariza, designated Minister of Culture in the government of the Colombian President-elect, Gustavo Petro, celebrated the staging of this International Progressive Theater Festival in Venezuela while confirming her country's participation in the festival and thanking the Venezuelan authorities for their invitation.
Mr. Minister of Culture Ernesto Villegas, Minister of Culture of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. From Colombia, as Minister of Culture appointed by the government of Gustavo Petro, that will assume office on August 7, I would like to send you a very special greeting to the International Progressive Theater Festival. We will be participating there with the group La Candelaria that you invited. Thank you very much for this invitation. We want to tell you that from the government of President Gustavo Petro, we will be fighting non-stop for the cultural and artistic integration of Latin America and the Caribbean.
Thousands of women marched in Rio de Janeiro on Sunday, demanding more government support for marginalized women of color. Many displayed traditional clothes and danced to music related to Brazil's African history, while chanting and holding banners for the fight and the rights of dignity of black women. Next to Copacabana, the beach, the march marked the 8th Black Women's March after a 2-year break because of the pandemic. It raised awareness of women's issues just a few months before national elections, where women voters are expected to play a key role in choosing the country's next president. According to the latest polls, Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva leads President Jair Bolsonaro by double digits, especially among women. Dialogues between the Panamanian government and a group of social organizations move forward. Issues like fuel and food prices have been agreed upon. Now, the talks focus on medicine and education. The dialogue table reached 15 agreements on modifications to regulations from the Ministry of Health and the Social Security Fund regarding transparency on pricing and the access to the population. Meanwhile, there was no consensus concerning the profit margin of pharmaceutical and the supply chain. On the other hand, the government committed to invest 6% of the gross domestic product in education. And with this proposal, educators will discuss with their union members whether or not to lift the strike that has kept the schools closed for the last 4 weeks. In several cities in the United States, new caravans are held this Sunday in rejection of the U.S. blockade against Cuba. The initiative, organized by the Bridges of Love Solidarity Movement, is carried out under the slogan "President Biden, Keep Your Promises" in cities such as Miami, New York, and Los Angeles. The rally is part of the Solidarity Movement's show of support every last weekend of every month. Those mobilized reiterate the demand to the President of the United States to lift all the sanctions against Cuba and eliminate the unilateral siege imposed by successive governments in the White House, be they Democrats or Republicans, against the Caribbean nation. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. This Sunday, President Vladimir Putin approved by decree the new Russian naval doctrine and the updated version of the naval regulations within the framework of the Naval Day of celebrations. The announcement took place in the History Museum of St. Petersburg inside the Peter and Paul Fortress. The document lists 10 major challenges and threats to the national security and sustainable development of the Russian and the Eurasian giant in the maritime dimension. According to the new naval doctrine, the demands of the United States for dominance in the world, in the ocean also, and the growth of NATO's activity are the main challenges for Russia. Among other matters, it provides for the information of naval logistical support bases in Asia-Pacific states. The signing of the document took place before the parade of Navy Day. During the ceremony, Russian President Vladimir Putin reviewed the ships lined up in the Kronstadt harbor in the Gulf of Finland. This Sunday's naval parade, which coincides with the 326th anniversary of the Navy, was attended by over 40 ships, 42 air assets, and more than 3,500 troops. During his speech, the head of state highlighted the Russian Navy's capabilities, stating that it can give a striking response to anyone who dares to attack our sovereignty and freedom. In Russia, authorities of the city of Sevastopol reported that 6 people were injured in a drone attack targeting the headquarters of the Black Sea Fleet in the city in Crimea. The press office of the Black Sea Fleet reported that the injuries were caused by glass fragments from the explosion of windows at the headquarters caused by a homemade explosive inside the drone. Meanwhile, the representatives of Crimea in the Russian state, Olga Kovedity, confirmed that the attack was perpetrated from the territory of Sevastopol and assured that a search operation was deployed in the region to catch the perpetrators of what she called a terrorist attack. And the World Health Organization spokesperson Margaret Harris warned of an unusually large outbreak of monkeypox worldwide, declaring a public health emergency of international concern as the virus transmission mode is still unidentified. Monkeypox is a rare viral disease that is usually transmitted through body fluids, respiratory droplets, and other contaminated materials. The disease usually results in fever, rash, and swollen lymph nodes. There have been sporadic outbreaks of monkeypox in the world since the 1970s, but the current outbreak is unusually catastrophic. The most sort of classic sign that indicates you got monkeypox are the little blisters on the skin. The blisters may be on the hands, feet, on the face, as well as less noticeable parts such as inside the mouth or the genitals, which raises the risk of person-to-person transmission.
It usually starts with feeling tired, as often happens with any virus, a fever, muscle aches, really there's some what we call malaise, where you just feel terrible, you feel ill. Now that can be any kind of virus, but then it moves to having swelling of the lymph nodes, quite often around the neck and other parts of the body. And the most sort of classical sign that indicates you've got monkeypox are these little bubbles, little blisters on your skin.
And the section of Beirut's massive port grain silos, partially ruined in the 2020 explosion, collapsed in a huge cloud of dust on Sunday. The collapse occurred after a weeks-long fire triggered by grains that had fermented and ignited in the summer heat. The northern block of the silos fell, causing large explosion and kicking up a thick red dust that enveloped the iconic structure and the port next to a presidential area. The general director for the port silo, Azad Haddad, said everything was under control, but that the situation has not subsided yet. In the meantime, the Civil Defense Department stated that other parts of the silo's northern block were at risk and the other sections of the compound could collapse. China conducted military exercises of its cause opposite to Taiwan after warning Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, to dismiss possible plans to visit the island. According to the Xinhua news agency, the military led fire exercises near the Pintan Islands of Fujian province, while the Maritime Safety Administration warned the ships to avoid the area. Such exercises usually involved artillery, including missiles, fighter planes, or other weapons. In the meantime, Chinese President Xi Jinping warned of his U.S. counterpart, Joe Biden, in a phone call on Thursday against external interference in Beijing's dealings with the island. The Asian giant's Ministry of Defense also warned Washington this week not to allow Pelosi, who is Biden's equal in rank as the leader of one of the three branches of the government, to visit Taiwan. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Speaking during the closing day of the African National Congress Party's conference, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa highlighted the fight against corruption and the country's struggling economy. The South African head of state said all the measures proposed to grow and transform the economy rely on a fiscal policy that ensures the national debt is contained within sustainable limits. The conference also discussed policies needed to address the nation's challenges, including high levels of poverty, 35% of unemployment rate, the country's electricity crisis, and the rising cost of living. During his speech, President Ramaphosa thanked the delegates for their support for the steps the government was taking to tackle these issues.
All the measures proposed to grow and transform the economy rely on a fiscal policy that ensures that our national debt is contained within sustainable limits and that spending is reprioritized away from consumption towards investment. In this way, we can align our fiscal policy with our industrial policy, which should focus on rebuilding and broadening our industrial base.
On Sunday, Senegal voted in parliamentary elections. The opposition hopes will force a coalition with President Macky Sall and curb any intention they may have for a third term. Polling stations opened at 8 a.m. local time and closed at 6 p.m. local time for the single round of voting, in which some 7 million Senegalese were eligible to vote. Partial results are expected by Monday, with provisional overall figures to be given no later than Friday. By midday, turnout had reached 22%. Turnout at several polling stations appeared relatively low. The National Election Commission deployed 22,000 observers nationwide. The ballot will decide the 165 seats of the single-chamber parliament, currently controlled by the president's supporters, for the next 5 years. Sudanese protesters rallied in the capital Khartoum against last year's military coup and the recent spike in tribal violence. Last year's coup plunged the nation into deepening turmoil with a spiraling economic crisis, violent crackdown on anti-coup protesters, and a spike in ethnic clashes in several regions.
As you know, today the protest is for coexistence, a protest to support a unified nation. Since long ago, we have witnessed the tribal fighting and the massacres taking place in Darfur, the Blue Nile State, and in Sur Kordofan, and it has persisted. On the contrary, the coup military council have turned a blind eye on the regional and tribal problems. We will go out today with the million-strong march on July 31 in Bashadar, near the presidential palace, to call for coexistence, to stop wars, not to tribalism, not to regionalism, not to racism. Racism is not building a nation. We are all brothers.
In Iraq, supporters of Shiite leader Muqtada Sadr are occupying parliament for the second time in 3 days in Baghdad's heavily fortified Green Zone. Hundreds of supporters continue occupying the legislative seat in opposition to the prime minister candidacy of Mohammed al-Sudani, considering him close to the former head of government, Nouri al-Maliki, and parts of the country's corruption. During the protests, security forces closed several roads in the capital and fired tear gas and water on demonstrators. According to the local news agency INA, at least 60 people were injured. In this context, Iraq's Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kazemi called on all the country's political parties to start negotiations in order to put an end to the crisis.
The political bloc must sit down and negotiate and understand for the sake of Iraq and the Iraqi people. And the language of treason and exclusion must be avoided. I call on everyone to be calm, patient, and rational, and not to be drawn into confrontation. and I call on citizens not to clash with the security forces and to respect state institutions.
TeleSUR English continues to grow. Its signal now reaches Europe. You can order it from your cable dealer or tune it yourself. These parameters that you see on the screen are in place since July 1st. Quite soon, further changes will be implemented for the signals in the Middle East and Africa. Now, more than ever, the world connects to us and our stories are heard in other farther away nations. This news multi-platform will continue providing truthful content to oppose the hegemonic media's narrative and our faithfulness to our audience. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.